We want to get a different perspective. Joining us now, Democratic Senator Chris Coons, one of the leading voices on the Foreign Relations Committee. And Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be with you.
You have been very critical of President Trump for some of his threatening of North Korea over the last year or so. Here you were last summer when the president talked about raining fire and fury on the Kim regime.
I don't frankly think blustery rhetoric is what's called for at this time. We shouldn't, as a superpower, make threats we are not fully prepared to follow through on immediately.
Looking back now, was President Trump right and were you wrong, and did his unconventional style of threats and insults, and especially the maximum pressure of his economic sanctions, did that get us to the place we are right now where Kim is at the table?
Well, we've been here 3 times before, as you know, under previous administrations of both parties. Kim Jong-un, his father, his grandfather, the regime that rules North Korea, has done a 2 steps forward, 1 step back strategy where they make progress in their nuclear weapons program or missile program and then agree to come to the table and negotiate denuclearization, which doesn't come through. I'll give President Trump credit for having helped create this opening through the sanctions regime he's helped put together and put in place. And I was encouraged by what I heard from Ambassador Bolton, a determination to not lighten up on North Korea until there are verifiable and irreversible changes to their nuclear weapons program. There's going to be a lot of hard work ahead. A summit isn't a strategy, but having an upcoming summit with an opening where the Supreme Leader of North Korea has already made a number of encouraging offers, I think is a terrific opportunity.
So I want to pick up on the quite hard line that Ambassador Bolton just took, which in effect was, you got to give up everything before we give up anything. Do you think that's practical, and do you think that's the way to go?
My hunch is we're going to have to take several confidence-building steps on both sides. But for us to back off the sanctions against North Korea without a process in place for a verifiable and irreversible change to the nuclear weapons program would be a mistake.
And what about when Kim talks about a denuclearization of the entire peninsula and the possibility that that means that we would keep nukes in the form of either planes or ships off the peninsula? Is that something you could live with?
That's not something that I would embrace, but I think there's a lot of players here that need to be included and consulted. The South Korean government, the Japanese government, these are countries that are vital allies of ours in the region that have been directly threatened by Kim Jong-un as well as the United States. But to be clear, one of the things Kim Jong-un has been saying recently is, I've developed this nuclear weapons capability to defend my country and my regime from an aggressive United States. I do think we can and should repeat our commitment to not seek regime change as long as they are also making positive steps towards signing an end to the Korean conflict, restoring relations with South Korea, and making progress in negotiations with the United States.
I want to turn to Iran, because you've also criticized President Trump for threatening to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. But because of his threat, President Macron this week, Chancellor Merkel came to Washington to plead with him to make what I was just discussing with John Bolton, these kinds of side deals on issues the nuclear deal doesn't cover. Again, is Mr. Trump's hard line in the case of Iran, is that also working?
Well, I think this is a terrific opportunity for President Trump, who made his reputation as a builder, to build on the Iran nuclear deal and to deal with, as you just said, the areas that were not fully resolved through the Iran nuclear deal. The ballistic missile program, their support for terrorism in the region, their terrible human rights record. The Iranian regime is a dangerous, threatening regime, and if President Trump can successfully lead an effort with our European allies to rein in or to end their ballistic missile program, to change the outcome of the current Iranian deal so that there isn't a sunset clause, I think these would be positive things that I would support.
The president fired back Friday at Iran's threat to pull out of the nuclear deal if these added sanctions, if these added threats are put on the deal. Here was President Trump's response.
They restart their nuclear program, they will have bigger problems than they have ever had before.
They will not be doing nuclear weapons, that I can tell you. Okay? They're not going to be doing nuclear weapons. You can bank on it.
Given how successful President Trump seems to have been with his threats, at least so far, So far. Do you have any problems with that?
I think making it clear to Iran that it continues to be our position that we will not allow them to develop nuclear weapons is completely appropriate. Iran has threatened both our vital ally Israel and our European allies and the United States, as has Kim Jong-un of North Korea, and drawing a clear line that we will not tolerate a nuclear-capable Iran, I think, is completely appropriate. But it's my hope that the president will pursue the wiser path of continuing to get the advantages we are currently getting out of the Iran nuclear deal. Don't take my word for it. His own Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, has said the same. The Republican chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee has said the same. Even folks who oppose the Iran nuclear deal today see that we get more benefits by staying in it than by tearing it up.
I'm just curious, because this must be an interesting time for you and a lot of other Democrats who've been very critical of this president when it comes to foreign policy. And at least for now, and it's a preliminary stage, nothing's been decided with Kim, nothing has happened specifically with Iran, but it does seem to be working.
If it works, I'll be the first to cheer on the president, because frankly, although we are political opponents, we have different values and we come at politics and public service in different ways. I want the United States to succeed. So if President Trump's strategy succeeds with North Korea, succeeds with Iran, that's in our country's best interest.
Let's turn to the special counsel's Russia investigation. You were one of 4 senators, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, who sponsored a bill the Senate Judiciary Committee passed this week by a wide margin to protect the special counsel if President Trump were to move to fire him. Why do you think that's necessary?
Well, I think it's necessary because President Trump himself keeps tweeting or saying things that suggest he hasn't fully given up the idea of possibly firing Robert Mueller. He called into Fox and Friends just last Thursday. He's issued a whole series of tweets saying that this is a witch hunt, that it's an attack on him and on democracy. It shouldn't be allowed to go on. And so as long as he is making these threatening statements, and as long as it's not clear why the Republican leadership in both the House and Senate, who say Robert Mueller should be left alone, should be unmolested, should be able to complete his investigation, they say they have confidence that President Trump won't fire Robert Mueller. I have no confidence, and obviously my colleagues, both Republican and Democrat, on the Judiciary Committee looked at this bill, which is an ounce of prevention, as my mom used to say, well worth a pound of cure. They looked at it and said this is a modest but reasonable step to make it just a little bit harder for the president to abruptly and without cause fire Robert Mueller. This would be in the best interests of the country and of the president, frankly.
I just want to pick up on that, because Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, as you point out, has said flatly he is not going to let the full Senate vote on this bill, which was approved by the Senate Judiciary Committee this week. Let's take a look at the senator.
I'm the one who decides what we take to the floor. That's my responsibility as the majority leader, and we'll not be having this on the floor of the Senate.
One, why do you think McConnell is refusing to bring up the bill? And 2, is there anything you can do about it?
Well, folks said this bill would never get a hearing. It got a hearing. They said it'd never get a markup. It got a markup. They said it'd never get through Judiciary Committee. It got through by a bipartisan 14-7 vote. As long as President Trump continues to say and do things that I'm sure his attorneys would prefer he didn't, to threaten to take action against the Department of Justice or Robert Mueller, I think the pressure to bring this to the floor will build. If it were put on the floor this coming week, I think we'd get 60 votes for it. So frankly, it's my hope that the majority leader will change his mind.
And why do you think his mind at this point is no bill, no vote?
Well, I think as the majority leader, he continues to say it would be disastrous for the president to interfere with the investigation, but I have confidence he won't. I don't know what that confidence is based on. This bill would be a responsible, small measure to preempt some constitutional crisis. Frankly, I'll say to the president, if you're watching, Mr. President, saying that you would sign this bill is the single boldest thing you could do to shut up the critics who say there is a risk you might fire Robert Mueller.
Senator Coons, thank you. Thanks for coming in today. Always good to talk with you, sir.
Thank you.
Up next, we'll bring in our Sunday group to discuss James Comey, the Mueller investigation, and another